I've been through there.
I have multiple times on the way to Myrtle Beach.
The Myrtle Beach.
We're going to get Myrtle Beach drunk. His mother had multiple illegitimate children, and Pee Wee was the youngest. His mother was a prostitute, and he was incredibly tiny for his age. Thus, how he ended up with the nickname Pee Wee.
Okay.
Because he was really a small kid. Now, his mother's maiden name was Parrott. He was Pee Wee Parrott, and later he would adopt the name Gaskins after a man he thought might be his father.
So he just basically started calling himself that.
Pee Wee Gaskins, yes. Because he didn't know who his real father was, and I suppose maybe his mother had thrown out a name or a couple of names, but it didn't seem that she necessarily knew.
Well, she'd be like, yeah, I was with 25 guys yesterday, but that Gaskin feller, I feel like it really went home. He really put it up in me, Pee Wee, so he might be your daddy.
Well, so maybe she would have been a great candidate for the Maury show.
Yeah.
She could have tested like her
45th guy.
Yeah. And maybe they would have found the dad. I don't know. But it was alleged that he didn't even know his name. His real name was Donald until he had a court appearance, like his first court appearance. So he grew up for years and years thinking his name was Pee Wee. Didn't even know that his birth name, his Christian name, whatever you want to say, is Donald.
Wow, so I'm making jokes about it, but it sounds like he was born into a very hard, life.
It did seem that it was a very unstable situation.
I'm sure he was.
Again, Mom's got a lot of men in and out of the house. She's potentially working as a prostitute. I mean, it's been heavily rumored that she was. A couple of kids, no baby daddies around, probably not a lot of financial support.
Or, just daily care for the kids,
Well, his young life was filled with neglect. At one point, Pee Wee reported that he drank some kerosene as a toddler and experienced some serious health problems as a result of that.
I'd say so.
But I'm not saying that accidents can't happen, but for your toddler to be drinking kerosene, I mean, that's a potential sign of neglect.
That's not good.
He was beaten and abused regularly at home by his mother and eventually his stepfather. His mother even sold her son to boyfriends and clients, sometimes for sexual abuse.
Oh, yeah, so now it's getting down into the very bad, horrible things.
He was bullied at school and often in fights with the other kids. He was a small guy, naturally kind of picked on for being the little, Pee Wee, little tiny guy.
Little tiny guy named Pee Wee, so he's going to catch hell.
And as a young kid, he joined a gang of neighborhood delinquents. They called themselves, I believe, the Trouble Trio.
Oh, wow.
And he began hanging out with these two brothers, Danny and Marsh. The kids would break into houses. They would steal whatever they could find and hawk it. So they were doing just little juvenile delinquent kinds of bullshit.
Some little badass kids and no parents around.
Yeah, unsupervised kids. You got to consider this was probably the late 30s, end of the Depression, early 40s. They ain't got no money.
Yeah, there's no money. There's no
supervision.
There's still, hardly any, I know I'm not going to get it completely right, but as far as programs and community things set up, you know what I mean? It's just, you're pretty much on your own.
There was no, big brothers, big sisters.
No, DSS probably didn't have a big footprint. Of course, they were garbage any fucking way.
Well, as I said, these kids would break into houses, steal whatever they could find. They would take money that they would get from the stolen items and have sex with prostitutes.
Oh. Damn.
And allegedly raped younger neighborhood boys.
Okay.
By 11, he had quit going to school altogether and was working at a local garage, doing mechanic work and cleaning up and just kind of learning the ropes, I guess, in the garage, mechanical types of
So it's the little badass kids with wearing their little wool clothes and shit, looking like Fabian's bunch, just run around doing whatever they want, right?
At one point, the three kids gang raped Marcia's little sister and were caught by the parents.
That's okay.
So as I mentioned, they hung out with a lot of kids at this, they had a little shack almost, I guess, where they would kind of frequent, like a clubhouse.
Was the American Women Hating Club or whatever, the Little Rascals?
Yeah, was it the Female Woman Hating Club or something? Or the He-Man Woman Hating Club, whatever that was called. Exactly. So I kind of imagined this little gang of kids, like the Little Rascals, but
bad.
Fucking horrible. So as I said, they were, raping some of the younger boys. Eventually, it got pared down or narrowed down to just like the 3 of these guys. Because, of course, the other kids are like, no.
Y'all going a little too hard for me. I thought we was going to throw some eggs.
I don't want to be part of this. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not enjoying being sodomized.
And I don't want to rape people.
Maybe I don't want to, yeah. Well, and allegedly they were like having sex with farm animals. Pee Wee says they were having sex with sheep and things as well.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So this is like a recipe for like, this is gonna be a fucked up kid. And or if he's making this shit up, then obviously he's fucked up to even like admit that this is the kind of thing they were doing.
Yeah, see, that's beyond some little badass kids who had a hard life. I mean, you're getting into maybe one of those deals where some certain types of personalities get together and, you know, then they start doing worse and worse, trying to kind of impress each other.
Right.
Who's the most fucked up?
Well, when they raped Marcia's little sister, they were caught by the parents. The boys were beaten as punishment instead of getting like the authorities involved.
Oh, yeah, that's going to fix them.
Well, at the time, I mean, I guess law enforcement didn't have a heavy presence like it does today.
Right.
They knew that there would be a stigma around the event, not only for the daughter, the sons, but the family in general. I mean, there were just, I guess, a lot of reasons why, and not necessarily that they made sense or would make sense today, but
well, in that context,
it was just a different time.
Yeah, I kind of see part of that, you know, as far as not reporting it because of, you know, like you said, small town, all that shit.
The parents supposedly hung the boys upside down and beat them. And beat them pretty severely. Like, until they were, you know, black and blue, bleeding. Just, like, gave these kids a fucking beating of their life. At the age of 13, he hit his female cousin in the head with a hatchet after breaking into her house when her family had gone to a funeral.
Okay.
Because Pee Wee said that when he was burglarizing homes, the best way to do it obviously is when there's no one home. And that if he knew a family was going to something like a funeral, church, a wedding, that they would be gone. So he would kind of comb like obituaries and see who had died and or if he knew someone's family had died and they were going to a funeral, that's when was like a prime time to go break in a house.
Well, that's kind of smart from a criminal perspective.
It's been reported that she was his female cousin, but then other reports just describe her as a female, so I'm not 100% sure. But I'm assuming maybe she was a distant cousin because back in the day, people were not as mobile as they are today or nomadic, so you tend to be related to most everyone in your small town.
Right.
She survived the attack, and she knew, of course, who Pee Wee was, told the authorities that he had attacked her. He was sent to the South Carolina Industrial School for Boys.
That sounds like a fun place.
Yeah. His sentence said he'd be there until the age of 18. Now, we know, just reported from other serial killers, criminals, and just from that time period, that these industrial schools or these reform schools were a fucking nightmare. Manson
Panzram sticks out. I really think he was already fucked up, but the monster he became was these places.
Well,
and it starts when they're little and young and they go to first to go here.
Exactly. And like Charles Manson,
yep,
he was kind of in and out of these schools.
Yep.
And they were just so horrific. I mean, Gaskins would later say he was raped by fellow inmates at the school daily. According to the book, The Final Truth, Pee Wee claims that there was an inmate there that he called Boss Poss.
Okay.
What a name. That claimed ownership of Pee Wee, meaning that he could rape him
so he's
as much as he wants. Like, you're my lover, you're my property. He would trade him out for stuff like cigarettes to the other boys.
So there's no supervision, no oversight. They're just basically corralling these kids into one place and keeping them there and just like throw some porridge and fucking gruel in there. Just enough to keep them alive. And then they're just doing whatever they want.
And like working their asses off, you know,
yeah,
and that kind of thing. Yeah. And these schools were just filled with rampant sexual abuse at the time. So the story that Pee Wee tells is likely true.
Yeah. Oh, very likely.
Now, at some point, he escaped the school and ran away. Well, yeah, who wouldn't? He met up with Boss Poss's uncle. Now, Boss Poss is the kid who was, like, raping him on the reg.
Yeah, you think there's, like, some Stockholm Syndrome going on there?
Possibly, But he met up with the uncle who worked for a carnival and got Pee Wee a job as like a roustabout, like helping set up the tents and the rides and the games.
I want to be a roustabout.
You do?
You know, when I was in Shelby and the carnival would come, or the fair, they would literally come downtown and like gather up the winos and stuff, or whoever's just milling around, and say you want to work for the day, and they would get them, that'd be their extra manpower to go set up rides and stuff.
Well, carnies, I mean, it just seems the stereotype of the carny is that they're kind of like the weird misfit freak pedophile criminals. Is that true? I mean, that's the impression I get.
Well, it seems like not that long ago there was a guy with a carnival who was caught doing something, but I think it nowadays turned more into just the people who are restless spirits, kind of like a rolling stone. But my mom would always freak out about us riding the ride. We want to ride the rides. We get there, she wants to eat the fair food, and we want to ride the rides. But she always would talk about, oh, they have drunks and winos putting this stuff together. And they literally did have them helping. So,
well, yeah.
We still got to ride the shit and we didn't die.
Well, weirdly enough, Pee Wee claims that he and the boss had a decade-long friendship, like, after their time at reform school.
Okay.
And I guess the boss ended up dying kind of young, like in his 20s or something.
All right.
But they were buddies. So, hey, you brutalized me for years, made me your property, made me your bitch, but I'm going to be your buddy.
Well, you know, in that environment, maybe if he may have also like offered him some form of protection along once he claimed ownership of it. You know what I mean? Instead, if you're in there with a bunch of monsters and out of control people, it's either you're prey for all of them or you got just this one dude who's raping you every night. And like he just like, I don't know. Maybe there's some kind of...
Maybe there's even a little romance developing there.
I'm saying maybe he kind of likes how he's bringing the rape train.
I don't know.
I don't know.
The whole thing is just really hard to wrap your head around. He got married during this time to a 13-year-old girl who was the daughter of a carny.
Okay.
And now this is kind of going to set the stage for Pee Wee because it seems like throughout his life, he definitely has a fetish for young girls. Yeah. She wanted to have a normal life, and she didn't want to live the carnival life. I mean, she was 13. She was still very young. But, you know, she'd grown up in a carny family.
Probably had her feel of that.
Always on the road, you know, living out of, like, one of those little trailers, camper types of caravans. And she just didn't want to do that anymore, which is very understandable. So she encouraged him to go back to the South Carolina boys' school and complete his sentence. He returned to the school and eventually was released in 1951.
Oh, so he went back, turned himself in, trying to be honest, so he could have a clean name, be out and live somewhere, right?
A psychiatrist who had evaluated him at the school described Pee Wee as very dangerous with homicidal tendencies and recommended that he not be released yet, but they let him out anyway.
Okay.
So this guy's like, Pee Wee's pretty fucked up. He doesn't need to be out in the world working this carny circuit. Now, when he was released from the reform school, he naturally had a hard time finding work because he didn't really have any skill set. He's a young man, but he spent his juvenile formative years at this boys' school. I'm assuming not a highly educated little feller.
Right.
So had a hard time getting work, but eventually gets hooked up with some sort of tobacco job, working in tobacco fields, tobacco plantations.
Well, that'd be big back then.
So this was like around 1953 that he's working on a tobacco plantation, and there's a teenage girl there that makes him angry. I guess she either kind of turned down his advance or you just said something kind of smart ass to him.
She might make fun of his little ass.
Yeah, so he attacked her with a hammer. Because that's what you do.
Because he has homicidal tendencies, just like the doctor fucking said.
He was sentenced to 6 years in state prison. He's graduated from this boys' like reform school, basically, to state prison.
So he has no impulse control, basically.
Seemingly not.
So he cleared his name up, trying to do the right thing and establish himself, and he just, you know, there's another 6 years in jail.
Well, while incarcerated at the state prison, he's going to find that being in a state prison is even worse than the boys' school.
Yep.
He was raped by inmates again. Now, he was 5'2". Some reports say that he may have